Alright, it is day 3 of Graphic Novel Week, and as I mentioned at the tail end of yesterday's video, I am currently house sitting for neighbors who are living it up in Mexico. Thus the scenery change, and sorry if it's a little bit of a busier background than normal, but it was the best place I could find at the moment to film. Also sorry if I'm leaning slightly. My camera is propped on a book that the spine is kind of a little bit broken and slanted on, but again, best place I could find, so just going with it. But anyway, on to the meat of today's video. On Monday, I had a little viewer's choice and I asked you guys what you wanted to see, and one of the options was a discussion of comics and graphic novels that I think would be well suited to kids. And though viewer's choice is still going on and I still want you guys to weigh in, I decided that that was a topic that I wanted to tackle either way, so we're just gonna do it. So this list is by no means comprehensive, but it's everything that kind of came to mind that I would want to share with kids, and hopefully you will find helpful in sharing with your own kids or your classrooms. And I'm just going to put pictures of the books on screen when I talk about them, rather than holding up the books like I normally would, because as I said, I'm not at my house, so sorry for that. But I wasn't about to lug all of these books down here and then back. Just wasn't going to happen. So my thought process in looking at this was kind of the books that would be well suited to the middle grade reader and under. So probably 12 max, and then younger than that. Some will skew more younger, some will skew more older, but books that are ideal for a younger reader. Now that's not to say that anyone over a middle grade wouldn't enjoy these. You don't have to be 12 or under to like them, clearly. I am not, and I do. Kind of take this with a grain of salt and use your judgment, but that was my sort of thought process in picking these out. And I'm going to have links of all of the books I mentioned below, as well as links to various lists and awards and publishers that can kind of provide further resources and you can find more recommendations from. So definitely check out the info box if you're looking for graphic novels and comics for your kid, because there will be a whole bunch of stuff down there that will hopefully help you out. Anyway, enough rambling, let's get into it. Kicking off the recommendations themselves, you know that I can't do one of these, a graphic novel recommendation of any type of video, without giving a mention to the Zeta the Space Girl series by Ben Hackey. I adore these books. You guys know I adore these books. I talk about them all the time, even when I'm not talking about graphic novels. They're just fantastic. And they are perfectly suited to kids. Whimsical, fun, great characters, great world, great art, humor, just everything going for it. Kids will like these, teens will like these, adults will like these, and you should pick them up. On the sort of younger spectrum, I would say there are a lot of sort of quasi-educational graphic novels that you can work in. Don't take that in any way to mean they're going to be boring or heavy-handed and the kids are going to feel like, oh, sure, we're reading for fun, but it's like a textbook. It's not that at all, but just things that you can kind of use to supplement their education, or if they've got an interest in certain areas, or just that would work and might make you feel like it's a little more wholesome while they're still having a lot of fun. So things like the Stratford Zoo series, which retells Shakespeare's stories at a zoo where the animals put on plays after hours, and they're hilarious. You might have to explain some things, but they're not going to be as dark as if you were reading Macbeth to your 6-year-old. It's not like that at all. It's all very lighthearted and silly and really, really cute, so that's a great one. There's also the Science Comics series, I think is what it's called. Comics about dinosaurs and coral reefs and the human body and just things like that, that are very clearly meant to be on the educational end of the spectrum, but are told in such a fun and kind of irreverent way. Silly and fun enough that I think they would engage kids in these educational topics. And also if your kid is interested in those things, like if they love dinosaurs, that's perfect. There's a dinosaur one. So that series is a great one to look into. Also, of course, obviously a great one for classrooms. I mentioned these yesterday, but the Olympian series by George O'Connor, which retells the Greek myths, is another great one for classrooms and for kids that are really interested in mythology or like something kind of fantastical. They're really faithful to the stories while also being playful, so you are kind of teaching your kid about mythology when they read these, but they're also really funny and great interpretations, and they have notes in the back for sort of further study or resources that the author used to. They're just a really great series for adults and kids alike. Moving away from the educational just into the silly though, I know a lot of kids love the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. I personally am not a huge fan of them. In fact, I've only ever read the one and I hated it. But I read it with my little sister when we were having a book club when she was probably, I don't know, 9 or so, and she loved it. And they're hugely popular, so clearly kids do love them. I don't, but kids do. So, kind of read it yourself, use your judgment on whether it's right for your kid, but a lot of kids love them. Same for the Captain Underpants series, which is the only thing that I could ever get my brother to read when he was a kid. Literally the only books that he ever wanted. Captain Underpants. Also one of the most frequently banned and challenged books or book series in the country, so again, use your judgment if you don't feel it's right for you and your family. The Rapunzel's Revenge series by Shannon Hale retells the fairy tales that we all know and love, but in really new and kind of adventuresome takes, and is a lot of fun. Very popular series for both girls and boys, so that's a good one to check out. And while I'm on the topic of fairy tales, harkening back to that little educational thing, there is the Anthology Series by Chris Duffy, edited by Chris Duffy. It's by a whole lot of people. And there's a fairy tale book and a fables book. They are both chock full of different illustrators and comic artists, so it's a good way to find someone whose style that you like or someone whose style your kid likes. And they're a really easy, approachable way because they are just quick 2-3 page retellings of fairy tales and fables. So, and also kind of going off of that into the whole sort of folklore fantasy thing, the Giants Beware series is a really great one for young kids and those who like adventure, girls who want a really fearsome and getting muddy type of heroine, and a female lead that boys will also really like. So far there are 2, I believe. It's Giants Beware and Dragons Beware. They're both really silly and funny, and there's a baby toe-eating giant. I think he eats baby toes. It might be baby feet in general. But it's just really kind of slapsticky and hilarious. And while we're on the subject of just silly and cute and something that I think will appeal to a lot of kids, there is a new one. I don't think it's out quite yet. It's coming out soon, and I can't recall offhand who it's by, but, look at the picture. And that's Hippopotamus, which is just, first of all, the cutest title ever. That's going to draw kids in immediately. A lot of kids, I think, will enjoy this one. The Amulet series is another kind of fantastic, somewhat adventure-y series that will appeal to a lot of kids. On the kind of older end of the spectrum, I think you can start introducing your kid to some that might skew a little more YA or a little more mature. Not super mature by any means, and I'll kind of address them as I go, but a little bit away from the cutesy, weird, or gross-out humor thing that you get in a lot of the young comics, and into more weighty topics that are just dealt with in graphic novel form. Or these are just some that skew a little older than, something that a 6-year-old would like. So things like American-Born Chinese, or pretty much anything by Jean Luen Yang, is fantastic, and in fact, American-Born Chinese was the first book ever to be nominated, and it may have even won a National Book Award. So that was huge. He is well respected. In fact, I believe he is the current children's book ambassador. This one specifically, American-Born Chinese, might be a little bit harder. You'd probably want to read it with your kid depending on their age, just because it's 3 separate stories told in 3 very different styles and can feel very out there. And it's not until they all come together at the end that you realize how significant it is. And if I recall right, it actually made me cry a little bit. So it might be one that you'll want to discuss or use as a sort of starting point to open up a bigger discussion about diversity, about racism, about personal identity and cultural identity, and just how people perceive themselves or feel about themselves. And I cannot recommend it enough. Same for books like Persepolis or Jerusalem. These are books that are definitely more weighty, and in the case of these, are either memoirs or based on real events, and as a result there's a real world implication, so that you can use these to discuss things with your kid, or use them, allow them to read them to kind of grow their empathy, something that books are great at. Now these can be a little more adult, so I would say definitely flip through them before you hand them to your kid, or know what your kid is ready for. Do the parenting on this. It's a graphic novel. It's not going to take you that long to just flip through and decide if it's right for them. Even better, though, would be to read it with them and discuss it with them. Again, it's a graphic novel. It's going to take you a couple hours max. It will be well worth your time, promise you on that. Same for Mouse, which is another one that I would recommend absolutely everyone read, but it is a pretty serious and kind of heart-wrenching graphic novel. It might not seem like it at first because it's about mice, but it's actually about the Holocaust and is this big extended metaphor where the Jews are mice and the Nazis are cats, and again is another award winner, but it is heavier. It is more weighty and more serious and potentially more adult. It's been a while since I read it, so I can't say if there's anything too boundary pushing, but you know, one that you might want to read before you just hand to your kid. And there are a few for those kind of middle school-ish or older elementary, kind of looking toward middle school and high school. Things like Nothing Can Possibly Go Wrong or Friends with Boys, Anya's Ghost, different things like that, that are probably aimed more at a teen audience but would still be just fine in most cases for a middle grade audience. There are also a few that would be great, I think, for both girls and boys, but especially for girls who are looking for other girls in comics. Some of them I haven't necessarily read, so I have a passing familiarity, and again, you might want to look into them. Roller Girl would be a fantastic one, especially for, you know, those sort of 11, 12-year-old fierce girls who aren't super girly and want to see that reflected in a story. Nimona and Lumberjanes, I've been told, are both excellent, well worth the read, and in fact, Nimona is in my current stack waiting to be read. I don't have Lumberjanes yet though, but I've had so many people recommend that one to me. There are tons and tons and tons more out there, even right down to compilations, their favorite comic strips like Calvin and Hobbes or Bone, or graphic novelizations of books, books with illustrations. I'm going to leave links below to a number of lists that I think might help you find more recommendations, including some that aren't actually graphic novels, but that are illustrated novels or graphic novelizations. So make sure to check those out. And if you have any that you have recommended to your own kids, or that you loved as a child, or that your kids request from the library or anything like that, please leave them in the comments so that it's an ongoing resource and people are constantly finding new titles for themselves, their children, and their classrooms. I have a feeling this ended up being a really long video because I'm looking at the time and it's just ticking away. It's going to be a pain to edit. Sorry if it ended up being really long and really rambly, but I wanted to give you all the information that I could and as many recommendations as I could, so hopefully this helped some of you. But here's where I'm going to cut this one, so that is all for now. I will see you again tomorrow for more Graphic Novel Week, and if you've missed anything so far, there's a full playlist, so make sure you check that out. As well as stopping over at my blog, where I've got all kinds of graphic novel and comic-y goodness there as well. But I will see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching, and happy reading! Do we need more light? I feel like maybe we need more light. No, that might be worse.